Yes, everyone, welcome back to the Irish Hotspur. Your boys Jack and Dave here. We're going to be comparing Ivan Toney and Solanke. We're going to be asking some of the questions. Why do people like Ivan Toney so much more than Solanke? If you're maybe a Solanke lover, tell us why in the comments below, please, because it seems like plenty of the Spurs fan base aren't that keen on him, or at least that's what we're telling from the outside, or at least that's what we see from the outside in. But everybody, if you can for us, get in those comments below. Which one would you prefer? For around the price of 65 million. I think the Ivan Toney price is still quite expensive. The Solanke one is still quite expensive as well. So which one would you rather prefer? You would like to provide some context to why we're making this video of just Toney versus Solanke. Would you mind doing that for us? Why is it that we're not including Gyökeres in this video, or an Osimhen, or an Alvarez, or something like that?
Yeah, look, ideally, I think many Spurs fans would probably like us to go abroad and bring somebody else in here, like a Gyökeres or, players that you mentioned, Jack. But when you actually go and look at the squad on the official Tottenham Hotspur page, we're actually over the quota for foreign players that you have to register to meet the criteria for the Premier League and for Europe. So that's probably why they're trying to reduce, sell off a lot of the deadwood and stuff like that. But also, one of the only real areas of real improvement that we can really make drastically to this squad without having to sell off some of the better players that we have in a foreign area in the squad is actually the homegrown side of the squad. It's one that's been decimated for quite some time and decimated even further with the sale of Harry Kane. So, that's the area that Tottenham really need to address. And I don't think anyone should be surprised. It's actually something that me and you have highlighted on this channel for about 2 to 3 years now. That's an area eventually Tottenham are going to have to get stuck into. And I think we even pre-warned that it could happen this summer. And it looks like it is. So that's why we're going to make the comparison between Solanke and Toney, because Tottenham's need to bring in homegrown players.
And another little thing I'd add to that too is you look in the past where Spurs, when they have spent big, it has been usually on the non-homegrown players, and in some cases it didn't work out for them. I know you and I are big defenders of Richarlison, but plenty of people are not, and we did spend big money on him. You also look at Tanguy and Ndombele, the very infamous case of a player who we spent a lot of money on that was also a non-homegrown player. Giovanni Lo Celso is another example. But then there have been some success stories with Mickey van de Ven, Romero, and plenty of others that we might have spent a bit bigger on, and Pedro Porro included. But it feels like Spurs, they eventually have needed to spend that big type of price tag on more of a homegrown type of player in the market. And it looks like Ivan Toney or Solanke are some of the better choices, at least for that striker position, that are available to us. Yeah.
I'd also like to add, Jack, I think there's no better time now than ever before to hit that homegrown market, because I think England are producing a lot of players. If you look at the squad that went to Euros and some of the players that were also left out, I actually think now is the right time to go and bolster your homegrown side of the squad, because the talent's genuinely there. In years gone by, outside of the England squad, a lot of it was sort of just generic. There was no real players that stood out, but right now, even outside of the England squad, outside of the squad that went to the Euros, there's still players in the Premier League that stand out. So I'd like to throw that in there as well. I think it's valid.
Yeah, it's good context that we're, giving you guys in the beginning, I'd say. But Dave, one of the main questions we have to ask is that if they're both going to be for around the big price of, let's say, 65 million, because Ivan Toney's price, Dave has just told me before recording, is actually shooting up because of a recent injury to the new striker that Brentford bought in to actually technically replace Toney. He ended up picking up a big injury during preseason. So it turns out that original price that could have been down to 40, 30 million maybe for Toney is now shot all the way back up to probably something similar to what we could be getting Solanke for. So let's just say, Dave, they are going to be for around the same price. Who's more worth that fee?
To be brutally honest, for me, I'm all in the Ivan Toney camp if these are the two strikers that we have to choose from. And the reason why I think Ivan Toney is more worth the fee, because you made a good point before we came on here that they both come from relatively similar sort of clubs, in similar positions and stuff like that. But I think Ivan Toney stands out a lot more and has got a lot more recognition from pundits, from fans, but also, from England, purely because I think he has a lot more about his game than someone like a Dominic Solanke. Don't get me wrong, I think Dominic Solanke tries to do a bit of everything and can offer you a bit of everything. I just think Ivan Toney is a lot more refined when he does it, in terms of, one thing he has over someone like Dominic Solanke is he's got a creativity in his locker. He can get on that ball. His first touch is always bang on, gets it under control, even though under pressure, and he can hold it up, play others in. He's got a good passing range about him. Plus, he scores goals. And I think when you look at it, Am I surprised he's the next one in line after Harry Kane, or has been for quite some time? No, I'm not, because I actually think he's very similar to a Harry Kane in a lot of ways, in terms of his all-round game, the physical presence, to being able to lead a line on its own. So for me, I think Ivan Toney is more worth that sort of money. Where it comes in is, notoriously, we don't have a good track record of dealing with Brentford, because Brentford will hold out for fees that they think is achievable.
Hmm.
Even when them
Hmm.
players have 1 year left on the contract, as shown with David Raya last year. They didn't jump when we went in there. They held out and got what they wanted off Arsenal in the end. When we went for Ollie Watkins when Brentford have it, we didn't want to stretch to that 35 million. So we don't really have a good track record of actually dealing with Brentford for their players. When we come calling, they stick to their price. And Daniel Levy doesn't like that, even though he does it to other people. So I think that's one of the big sticking points on this Ivan Toney deal is, can we actually get a deal done with Brentford? And like you alluded to, Jack, I actually think the price might even go up a little bit further now, because the original money they probably had ring fence for Ivan Toney, because let's face it, right, he's got 1 year left on his contract. Ideally, they want to cash in, but they're going to hold out to the last minute in the window for the value, because they know that the striker market is such short supply. So someone's going to trigger it, whether it's us or not. But with the injury of Igor, the guy that they brought in to replace Toney, that money previously that they were going to get for Toney was already ring fenced. I would probably
Hmm.
guess, for
Hmm.
improvements in other areas of the squad. But now that he's injured, they're going to want a little bit more on top to go and replace Ivan Toney when he goes out now, to have a striker for the start of the season. So that's probably put the price up a little bit more. But I just think for all-round game, and in terms of what I think suits Ange Postecoglou's system more, and what we really lacked up front last year in terms of that guy that can hold up the ball with his
Hmm.
back to goal and play others in. I just think Ivan Toney is much more better at that than Dominic Solanke.
Very, very good point, actually, that the Brentford deal is actually technically harder to do than the Bournemouth deal for a variety of reasons that you mentioned, including, of course, the one and only Daniel Levy, who likes to make things more difficult for us. And the team or the club Brentford will actually take their time when it comes to this, instead of maybe with Bournemouth, who might actually have
Mm.
already, I think, technically a replacement for Solanke ready. They brought in that guy from La Liga, I think Unal or Enos Unal from La Liga, who is technically his backup or being suited to replace him. Whereas with Ivan Toney's situation, that's just not the case. And Brentford are in a much trickier situation with that. So you could see
Mm.
how this would be more complicated on Ivan Toney's side, maybe even a bit more expensive actually than the Solanke deal. But when it comes to Ange Postecoglou, Dave, we can't think for him. We can't exactly, guess totally what he might have preferred. But if you were to guess what striker, maybe if he had to do what we're doing, picking between the two, who do you think Ange Postecoglou might prefer? And one of the big questions I'll follow up with is Ange Postecoglou. He loves doing that kind of phone call test with a player, and
Mm.
plenty of people think that Toney would not survive the Ange Postecoglou phone call test. What do you make of that suggestion? And if you were to think like Postecoglou does, who do you think he might have preferred?
Well, look, first of all, if we're look, the scouting data is the one that flags up these players, right? Now, some would argue you don't need the scouting data for these two guys. You'd have plenty of opinions on them because we already know who they are. I agree. But they would still do some data-led scouting on the two of these guys. And for me, it's obvious that Ivan Toney's, over the course of his career, will show up a lot better than Dominic Solanke's. That's just my opinion. So I think that would automatically lead them in Ivan Toney's corner. So for me, and like I said earlier on, Jack, I just think what we were missing in Ange Postecoglou's system last year was a guy that could play with his back to goal, that could deal with the ball with players around his feet, that is good technically, that could play others in as well as be a focal point. And I think Ivan Toney suits that bill a lot more than Dominic Solanke. For me, when I look at Dominic Solanke, a lot of his goals come from in between the sticks. And yes, in Postecoglou's system, to a degree, you do need someone that can operate between the sticks with the way we like to get the ball out wide and pull them back. But that option isn't always going to be there. So you have to have other facets to your game. And I just think Ivan Toney is much more suited to Ange Postecoglou's system than maybe what a Dominic Solanke would be in terms of all round. If we brought in Ivan Toney, I'd sit there and say, yes, we've solved the problem. If we bring in Dominic Solanke, I'm cautious. I'm like, we might have solved the problem, but are we also adding to the problem
Mm,
of some of the bang average players that we've got here, and the likes of Richarlison, Johnson, and Werner? You only adding to the problem. So I have that's where my skepticism comes in. But in terms of will Ivan Toney pass the phone call test, Jack? I do understand what people are saying, because it is very well known that Postecoglou likes to deal with good characters that
Yeah.
have a desire to go and achieve stuff. When you look at Ivan Toney's betting situation and all the stuff he got flagged for, I think it was over 200 and something,
Yeah.
cases. That's where maybe the doubt comes in. And I think that's where the doubt comes in, that right now, for many clubs looking to sanction a deal on Ivan Toney, I think before this, it would have been an absolute no-brainer. But since that's come in, maybe people are very hesitant to pay the large fee just in case something like that
Yeah.
arises again. However, Ivan Toney has said, and I know many people didn't like this video, but he did come out and say he does want to leave Brentford. He wants to move on. He wants to go to a club that's competing for trophies. So I think that's something that Ange Postecoglou can resonate with. I also think the hard come-up journey that Ivan Toney's had
Yeah.
compared to a Dominic Solanke. Dominic Solanke hails from Chelsea, didn't work out there, got an opportunity at Liverpool, didn't work out there. Ivan Toney's had to work his way up. He
Yeah.
was absolutely phenomenal at Coventry, I think it was beforehand, then done a great job for Brentford. So I think that's also something Ange Postecoglou can resonate with, because Postecoglou's had a hard journey. And for me, I think it's simple. It's like, look, you have your betting problems. I'm willing to stick my neck out on the line for you. I'm willing to give you what you crave. Now you owe me. Are you prepared to owe me? And I think it can be very easily solved. I actually don't think it's the big, massive problem that many people are maybe blowing it up to be, Jack. I think there's a lot Postecoglou can resonate with Toney with.
This might be a bit of a crazy opinion. I'm not sure if it's even the betting that's as big of an issue with Spurs, or maybe even with Ange Postecoglou. I do wonder if it was some of the ways that he conducted himself in that Diary of a CEO podcast interview, where
Mm,
he didn't exactly take much responsibility for the betting, right? He still had some excuses, still kind of made it out like he was a victim in all of it. I wonder if Ange Postecoglou doesn't really I didn't personally like that answer. I thought he was, technically guilty of the crime, and he
mm,
didn't seem to think that he was that guilty of the crime. So I wonder what Ange must have thought of that. And then also the fact that he, sort of just offered himself to Arsenal, right? Where he's just like, yeah, I would love to play for Arsenal, one day and play for a team like that. And I wonder what Ange Postecoglou thinks of that, when you are already tied down to a club like Brentford. Is that
mm,
really something that you just want to say, in front of a YouTuber podcaster like that? Maybe that's something that you say more behind closed doors instead of something that you just say out into the public. So again, I wonder what Ange Postecoglou must have thought of that. And also the kind of the other thing was, when it comes to sort of his ambition of him wanting to win trophies, like you mentioned, I think Ange definitely gets behind that. But he has also said that Ange doesn't like it when a player just wants to come to the club because, of Champions League, or because, they are going to be competing with the best of the best. He wants them to come to the club because they think that Tottenham Hotspur is the right club for them. It's that
mm,
slight distinction that he seems to try to make with players. He wants to make it clear to them, this is our project. This is what we're building here. Do you believe in this? And if
mm,
Ange Postecoglou gets a vibe from Ivan Toney that it's really just more for success, it's just so that he can progress his career, sometimes Ange Postecoglou might turn down a player for that reason, because he feels like they're more in it for themselves than they really are in it for the actual team and for the club and for the
mm,
the whole journey. And only we know, right, Ivan Toney's kind of answer to that, and Ange Postecoglou's vibe that he would get from an Ivan Toney from that.
mm.
So the phone call test, I think, is a fascinating question for, I actually don't even think there is a right answer, because only we would know how Ange Postecoglou would read
Mm.
someone like an Ivan Toney.
I was going to say, can I caveat that? Because I do think the best strikers in world football are the most selfish people. When you look at, I'll be brutally honest, when you look at team strikers, right, team players that are up front, are they the most successful across world football? I'd argue not, because they often sacrifice themselves for the team. But I do think the best strikers are more of a selfish person, goals orientated. And at the end of the day, I think managers allow for that factor to come in because they rely on goals. Everyone wants a goal scorer. So
Yeah.
I do understand what you're saying, but that's my caveat to that. I think the best strikers are selfish people.
And then my other question to you, Dave, would be, who's technically a better suit for Ange Ball? I agree with you. I think Ivan Toney probably has much better hold up play.
Mm,
He's probably better than Dominic Solanke with his back to goal, which is an essential piece of Ange Ball. And you could argue he's maybe even a better finisher with the chances that are presented to him than someone like a Dominic Solanke. That again, they do have very similar goal output, right? Tony's
mm,
best championship season was 31 goals and 10 assists. Dominic Solanke's best championship season was 29 goals and 7 assists, not too far apart from each other. And then Toney's best Premier League season is 20 goals and 4 assists, and Dominic Solanke's is 19 and 3. So they're actually not too far off when it comes to the actual goal and assist output. It's just what about them maybe suits Ange ball better. And I would think you would agree with me that Toney's probably, just by the seeing eye test, a better finisher and probably better with the hold up plays, more similar to a Harry Kane, like you say, which is very rare to find these days. And the one little question I wonder is maybe Solanke suits the pressing system a little bit better than an Ivan Toney. But how much does that even mean to Postecoglou? Can he make that sacrifice that maybe someone like a Toney might not be as good off of the ball as a Dominic Solanke? What would you say to that? That maybe he might prefer Solanke just for the fact that he's a better presser.
I think, look, they offer similar in terms of hold up play and, target man and stuff like that. It's just whether you think Solanke or Toney's better.
I think
at
Toney's
that.
just that little bit better in that department.
Yeah, I think so too, but it's a personal preference. I think, for me, where I actually see the differences is I think Solanke will work a lot harder out of possession in this system. And we do know that is very crucial to what Ange wants. That's one thing that Richarlison brought to that front line, just that relentless work rate, that relentless pressing. And the reason why is because it actually forces the keeper to go long more often than it does give him time to pass out from the back, which when teams do that, it kills us. We can't quite get that press right. So our best alternative is press the goalkeeper, force him to go long. And Solanke will be like Richarlison. He'll do that from minute 1 all the way through to minute 90. Ivan Toney, I don't think will. He's also 28 years of age. And when I look at Harry Kane in the Pochettino system started off sort of similar to that. But as the years went on, he started conserving himself out of possession so that he could assert himself more in possession, but also so he could look after his body a lot more. And I think Ivan Toney would probably be a similar case to that to a certain degree. So I think Solanke probably edges it there. But where I think Ivan Toney edges it and where I think he has the point of difference is that he can get on the ball and he can also spray them passes around. People may say, Dave, you're crazy, but I'm telling you, go and watch Brentford games. I've seen the guy do it. Get the ball into him, take it in, spray it out wide, go and get in the box and stuff like that. He can do that. I don't think Dominic Solanke has that in him. And the other thing is, Ivan Toney takes immaculate free kicks and penalties. I think he's much better from the penalty spot than Dominic Solanke. But also, he's a free kicks, I would argue, specialist, and probably one of the ones that I've seen get it more closer to the goal than any other player across the Premier League, bar James Ward-Prowse. I think he's a very consistent sort of free kick taker. So I think they're the areas of separations we're talking about. But again, overall, when we also go back to what we said, the similar attributes that they both bring, that we think Toney's just a little better. That's why I rest my case on. I think Toney would give us a lot more and a lot more consistency in what we're trying to do rather than a Solanke.
Very good answer. In my opinion, as much as I am a big fan of the rejuvenated Dominic Solanke, like we brought up in a previous video, I got Dave to get him into his fantasy team. That's how much I was a fan of his rejuvenation last season. I'd argue that Ivan Toney, if you are going to shell out around 70 million, I think Ivan Toney is more worth that 70 million than someone like Dominic Solanke. I think Dominic Solanke is a fine player, but is he worth that much? I kind of maintained, as much as I'm a big fan of his, I don't even know if he's worth that big of a fee, really, whereas someone like an Ivan Toney is. So that's my answer. I think you got a version of Dave's answer as well. Any final points from yourself there, Davo?
Yeah, hopefully common sense prevails, Jack. Hopefully Solanke's the smokescreen. No, look, being brutally honest, it does look like that Dominic Solanke is going to be the guy that's going to come in here. Jack, you mentioned the social media post he put out. Don't think he's putting that out unless he knows there's some sort of move on the table, for him.
Yeah.
And I do say to many people, look, I already know my feelings on Dominic Solanke. I don't think he's the right fit. However, if Tottenham bring him in here, it's done. There's no point in moaning about it and stuff. Well, actually, you can still moan about it and ask, is the ambition level correctly? But give the actual guy himself a chance. You know what I mean? When he's playing out there, don't put your personal feelings on the signing on him. At least give him a chance. But if you have any other questions on that are unsatisfactory, they need to go towards the board.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, if you can for us, and if you enjoyed this video, smash that like button, get in those comments below if you ever disagreed with us or agreed with us at any point in this video. And we'll see you later for any other future videos and for the fan show later on. Catch you, everybody. Have a good one. Come on, you Spurs. In the big Ange we trust. We never stop. Everywhere we go.